are on the website. And while I'm at it, Raleigh is our speaker tonight. I know he's going to be introduced, but hello, Raleigh. Good to see you again, and glad you could speak with us. I actually saw Raleigh in Hamvention in Ohio, so I just wanted to give a shout out for him and thanking him for speaking to us tonight. All right,
All
back
right.
to net control.
Okay, and back over to Rob to introduce our speaker.
Well, perfect segue there, Daryl, because I was just going to say Daryl was my contact for this, and he gave me a tip, and so I emailed Riley a few months back, and we finally came up with this date. So, Riley, I appreciate your patience and working with me on the email. You're in Pennsylvania, is that correct?
That's right, Gettysburg.
Okay, so he's like 3 hours ahead of us. So if he's grumpy, we know why. But I don't think he will be. Anyway, based on his QRZ page and all the cool information that I read on there, this guy's got some creds and he's going to talk to us. And I think we're going to really be educated here. So take it away and tell us what you got.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And if I leave you confused tonight, I guarantee that when you leave, you'll be confused on a much higher level and about more important things than when you came in. We have about 140 volunteer monitors. The FCC suggested back in 2019 that we have an enhanced program to assist enforcement that would be stronger than the OO program. And the FCC was concerned that they had lost half of their field offices and half of its field agents. And they saw no hope of improving that anytime soon. So they needed an adjunct to enforcement, and they promised us that they would participate in the training and we would have a fast track to refer cases to the FCC. And that has turned out to be true as far as the fast track goes. Let me adjust this lighting. Yeah, there you go. It would be easy to set up a program that would end up aggravating members and drive them away. But we wanted to set up a program in which amateurs and especially member amateurs would buy into, and in fact would help us gain members. So those are the goals. But the obvious goal is having an enforcement presence of some kind on the bands. Since the FCC only releases final actions, nothing else is public. So a lot of people think that nothing is going on, but there's a lot going on with the FCC. It does us very well to the extent it can with the limited field offices and limited agents. For example, in New York City, there's one agent. In Los Angeles, there's one agent. So they need help, and we're helping them, I hope, and we refer some cases to them, and they give us some cases. I ran some numbers a few months ago, and the recidivism rate among those who get advisory notices from the Volunteer Monitor program is less than 0.5%. So that shows me that the recipients are trusting the program and buying into it. Now, of course, there are some exceptions on 40 meters, mainly 7,200. The FCC has that case. There's a group on 7,200 that proves that radio frequency emissions cause brain damage. So don't even listen on that frequency. You're endangering yourself if you do. It's the same group of people that are several French fries short of a Happy Meal, and they use $10,000–15,000 worth of equipment not to act like idiots with walkie-talkies. Let's see. Now, I hope that you follow our program in QST. Every month, there's a Volunteer Monitor program summary for a few months before. And I just sent the August 2025 activity report the other day. And let me just give you that. And this is a typical month. Shows you what we do in a typical month. Technician operators in Indiana, Colorado, and Arizona were issued advisory notices concerning FT8 operation on 20 meters. Of course, technicians have no 20-meter privileges or have no 40-meter privileges either. Technician operators in Kansas and California were issued advisory notices covering FT8 on 40 meters. Technicians have only CW privileges on 40 meters. But in fairness to technicians, there are a number of band plans out there, the big poster type that are printed, and then it would lead you to believe that a technician could use FT8 on 40. And one would think that if a technician could use CW on 40, they surely should be able to use FT8. I don't know why that was set up that way. The FCC also wanted us to issue commendations to exceptional operators. And we issued a commendation last month to an operator in Maine for exceptional courtesy during a net on a 2-meter repeater, in which he explained to new licensees the misconceptions regarding antenna tuners and resonant and non-resonant antennas. An operator in Georgia was issued an advisory notice concerning transmitting music on 75 meters. There was one club presentation. You may know some of these people as the Mount Diablo Radio Club. There was one FCC meeting and one FCC referral. Now that's a typical month, but here's the thing that is also a typical month, and this has amazed me, and that's the number of hours that our VMs spend monitoring on the air. For July 2025, volunteer monitors reported 1,067 hours monitoring HF frequencies and 1,883 hours monitoring VHF frequencies and above. And that's a total of 2,900 hours. And we get from the volunteer monitors about 10 to 15 incident reports a month. And I think that's pretty good considering the number of hours that they spend monitoring. It's just amazing. Now, what we don't do, we don't babysit the bands. We especially can't babysit repeaters because there's 22,000 repeaters in the amateur service in this country. Setting up a repeater is a voluntary action, and it's got to be controlled by the repeater licensee and the control operator. We will help them manage the repeater. Many people don't know it, but a repeater owner can request anyone to stay off of the repeater for any reason or for no reason. And a lot of times they'll come to us with a problem in their repeater, and we tell them, well, first you've got to see what you can do to get them to stay off. And in a lot of states, there are statutes concerning harassment by radio communications or electronic communications. And in several states, repeater owners have gotten restraining orders against certain repeater users, and that seems to work. It's not true in all states, but it's true a lot of them. And a lot of them. Our job is to audit the bands and try to obtain cooperative efforts or cooperative efforts on the part of the violators. And this is a quick determination in most cases. We can usually tell very quickly if somebody's going to adhere to our advisory notice, and if they don't, we work with the FCC on it. Now, all amateur radio needs, and I've been doing this for a long time, but I've come to the conclusion that all amateur radio needs is a little more kindness. We have thousands and thousands of frequencies. We're not even channelized except on 60 meters. So all it takes to cure 90% of the interference is to change frequencies, a couple of kilohertz. And over on another desk there where my regular equipment is, I have some 1960, 61 Allied radio catalogs. And of course, there's DX Engineering and HRO catalogs around here too. And every one of the rigs made, and from the 60s on through today, there's one big knob. And that's to change frequencies. All you have to do. That's the idiot filter. And they put one big knob on there deliberately so you can change frequencies. And in most cases, turning the dial a few kilohertz will solve most problems. But in today's society, and this is the big problem in amateur radio today, our strong point has always been that we're a cross-section of society. Now, today, that's not an advantage because society, frankly, when you get down to it, society today is crazy as hell. There's no other way to say it. We didn't have airline rage, things like that. There's no such thing as a routine traffic stop anymore. Now, all of us in this room look like we're pretty close to the same age, but we had road rage, but we solved that with finger gestures. We didn't shoot anybody's windshield out. It's just a crazy society, and we're a cross section of society. A lot of people and some operators on our band are a few French fries short of a Happy Meal, and we just have to tolerate it till the pendulum swings. Now, the important thing now is that the lab at the league says that in the next few years, interference from solar power devices will far outnumber power line interference cases. Now, the power line industry knows us, and we have a lot of clout with the power industry, and they're very cooperative in solving radio frequency interference from power line devices. But the solar industry doesn't know us. That's a new industry, and a lot of the members of the solar industry don't even know what amateur radio is. So we don't want them judging us by what they hear on the bands. And my biggest fear is, my nightmare, and wakes me up sometimes, is a congressional subcommittee hearing where we're fighting for our bands, and the solar industry is saying, well, why do you want to protect this service? This is what we hear on the amateur bands, and they play something that they hear on 7200 late at night. We just don't want them to judge us by that. And so that's why we have to pay back to this avocation. It's far more than a hobby, so I don't say hobby. But we have a duty. We stand on the shoulders of all the great people that gave us amateur radio. And we have a duty to pay that forward. And if there are groups on there that are a little bit embarrassing to amateur radio, don't be involved in that group. If it's a net, cut them loose and tell them why. I've had to do that to several nets that I used to enjoy checking in, but they just don't represent amateur radio in a good way anymore. So I don't check into the net, and I don't have anything to do with it. And so you have to do that too. You have to realize that probably somebody's listening to you that is interested in amateur radio, and maybe it's somebody with their grandchild in the room, or a son or a daughter or whatever. And you are heard around the world, and we have to put a good face on amateur radio, because in today's society, technology can change right out from under us. I mean, who would have thought that Sears would go bankrupt? Who would have thought when you were kids that you could look at a picture on a telephone and see a pair of shoes or something and order it, and not only that, you'd have it delivered to your house the next day. I remember in the 4th grade, Mrs. Clemens told us that someday, she said, kids, someday you'll be able to look at a little picture beside your telephone and look at clothes or anything else you want ordered, and you won't even have to go in the store. And I remember telling my dad that night at dinner what she said, and my dad said, well, Miss Clemens has got a few loose marbles rolling around up there. But look what all we can do today. It changes right out from under us. And we can lose our frequencies. We don't have any rights to these frequencies. We have privileges, not rights. And it may be that we have a lot of our frequencies, or maybe all of them, because they're inherently unstable for now. But there's industry, commercial interest are looking at our frequencies, and we have billions of dollars of frequencies. We have thousands of frequencies on many different bands, and we have all the privileges you can think of, from power to activities. I mean, we can do contests, nets, POTA, anything like that. So a little more kindness would go a long way, and a little more gratitude and appreciation, because we can lose these frequencies. And the high-speed stock trading experiments have worried me on our frequencies. They have been in our bands because they were given STAs for our frequencies by mistake. And that's mostly straightened out. Excuse me, but they have been right at our band edges, and they're very powerful, and they would love to have some HF frequencies. Although I did hear recently that the Japanese had invented a system of fiber optics now that is just as fast as the radio transmissions would be for these groups that want high-speed stock trading on HF frequencies. But another thing I wanted to emphasize too is that the problems on the bands are not from newcomers. They're not from no-code techs, although I still have people complaining that you don't have to know the code anymore to get on amateur radio. I still have people complaining about that. Excuse me one second. And a lot of these people complaining haven't made a code contact in 20 years. And in fact, when I get complaints about code not being required, I usually ask the complainant, did you file anything in the proceeding that the FCC released to consider reducing or eliminating the code as a requirement? I haven't met anybody yet who did file comments in those proceedings. In fact, less than 0.5% of all amateurs filed any comments, but they're still complaining about it. Newcomers are not the problems on the bands. Our biggest problem on the band is the advanced and extra who have been licensed for decades, think they know everything. They don't like newcomers. They use 1,200 watts to talk across the state every single night to the same group of people, and they invariably get in arguments. There's not an extra in your room out there that hasn't called CQ on a dummy load. I guarantee you. And there's not an extra out there who hasn't come in one evening and turned on the rig and wondered what was wrong with the audio and then realized that the headphones were still plugged in from the night before. We've all done that. It's okay to make mistakes. Technicians, we want them to get on the bands, and they have a very good record. Any mistakes they make are absolutely innocent. They're not malicious, like some of our old timers who don't like newcomers and don't want to help anybody. And they've been licensed for far too long, and they think they know everything. That's the biggest problem. In fact, when I got the enforcement job, I went down to DC and I talked to the rules people, and I said, we're going to stay out of rulemaking and policy, and you guys stay out of enforcement. And that was the time when they were thinking about eliminating the code. And I said, but I will editorialize here. If you eliminate the code requirement, it's a big mistake because we need it as a filter to keep non-serious people out. And Bill Cross, I remember this conversation to this day, said, okay, well, you go back and you look at your 10 in about 6 months, you look at your 10 worst cases all over the country. And you tell me what license class they are. And of course, they were extra. So it has nothing to do, the code has not done anything to, the elimination of the code has not harmed amateur radio in any way whatsoever. And the no-code technicians are great operators. And in fact, eliminating the code has made the code more interesting. And the people that make these keyers and code machines, or code keyers and so forth, tell me that the business is better because now you don't have to learn the code, but the code is sort of like having a book on the required reading list in high school. It sort of ruined it. But not having to know the code now, more people have gotten interested in it, especially young people, because it's different from messaging and it's so forth, and it's kind of a secret thing that they know, and the code activity is up. Now, of course, FT8 has changed that a lot. FT8 has rejuvenated amateur radio, and that if you're not into FT8, I've made a few contacts on it, but I'm not into it heavily. But anything that rejuvenates amateur radio is I'm in favor of. Echolink, for a while, they're rejuvenated repeaters, and the PSK31 rejuvenated amateur radio. POTA has definitely rejuvenated amateur radio. The POTA participants are just fantastic operators, and they're very enthusiastic. And the QRPers have rejuvenated amateur radios as well. So Amateur radio is not really about enforcement. It's about paying it forward and standing on the shoulders of people that gave us this great avocation that joyfully occupies our lives. And we have to operate with gratitude and appreciation for all the vast frequencies and privileges we have. And the main thing is, and I try to tell these people, for example, a group around 7,200, which you cannot get through to them. Amateur radio is supposed to be our therapy, not the reason we need therapy. So when you get to dealing with shady operators, cut them loose. And we're responsible for amateur radio, and this is our watch. And we stand on the shoulders of great people that gave us this avocation, and we have to leave a legacy and think about leaving a legacy. And neither the FCC or any VM program in the world can save us from ourselves. So if we don't operate with gratitude and appreciate all the frequencies that we have, we'll end up losing them because we have so many. And as I mentioned earlier, technology can change right out from under us almost overnight. So my message is operate with gratitude. Stay away from those people that are bad reflections on amateur radio, and operate as if the whole world is listening, because it is. With the internet these days, the whole world is listening. And as I said, amateur radio should be our therapy, not the reason we need therapy. And when you run into an operator that needs therapy because of amateur radio, cut them loose, stay away from them. There's plenty of other frequencies out there that you can operate on. That's it for me. It's a little late here. If you have any questions, I'll take some questions, but if you don't get a chance to ask the question, my call sign K4ZDH is good on QRZ, and send me an email. I'll answer it within a day or two, I guarantee you.
All right, Riley, I've got a question here at
Okay.
in the cupboard. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you so much for the presentation. You mentioned a lot about 7200. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on what's been going on 14300, which in my case has been more problematic in a lot of ways than 7200.
Well, some of the 7200 group has gone up to 14300, one in particular. And some of these people, as I said, are just several French fries short of a Happy Meal. Some of them honestly have drug problems, psychological problems, PTSD, and so forth. 14300 and 313 used to be really bad. It tapered down for a decade, and 300 has drawn some of them. I guess they don't want the attention that they would draw on 7200. But the FCC is looking at all of that, and it's some of the same players. It's the same group of people.
Yeah, I think in recent, so I only really got into HF about 18 months ago, and 313 has been relatively tame during that time.
Okay.
One of the things I've
313 used to be horrible.
Yeah, that's what I heard before I got on the radio myself. 300, one of the things I've noticed recently is they've started to do like band blocking, like 10 kilohertz up and down. So if you like try to do POTA activation on 307, they'll come over there, turn their beam at you, and blast you with 1500.
All right. Well, we will look into that.
Frustrating.
I haven't heard that. I know that 14300 is needing some attention. Sounds like it's going to need a lot of attention. I'm glad you told me. We'll put some monitors on that.
All right, thank you. I've got Andy here. He's got a question.
Andy, KR6TG. Riley, is there somebody that plays your role with regard to like GMRS and some other public services?
I don't think so, but the FCC is actively looking at GMRS. GMRS has a problem. A lot of them want to network and tie in the repeaters, and you can't, or link the repeaters, I should say. And I know the FCC in this part of the country is actively looking at GMRS, but I don't know of any, they don't have any kind of monitor program that I know of.
Okay, I have another question. This is Dave.
Yes, sir. You have we have bands and frequencies that are extremely valuable to for purposes of communication, obviously, various tools. So I was wondering, I understand the big knob relative to communication and someone who's, let's say, a bad communicator or whatever it is, but we did have VEs and VECs out there in the past who were working on trying to keep people on the straight and narrow, shall we say. And I know you have a new program going on now. I was wondering if you wanted to say anything more about that. Also, I was wondering if there's a methodology you'd suggest for trying to upgrade people in their skills and abilities in amateur radio so that they can, because I'm making the assumption that all these interested parties are watching us, taking notes and saying, hey, look at this, look at that. Let's erase these people and let us use the frequencies. So I have a great concern, but appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Anybody else here at Cubberley in the room have a question? Oh, I got Bob. And then anybody on Zoom, if you've got a question, please put it in the chat and we'll get over to you there.
I got my own microphone though.
Don't you?
Hopefully it's still working.
Yep.
Hi, Bob, KN6 YGN. Could you just speak for a minute a little more about the logistics of how the volunteer monitors work? Do you
Yes.
get assignments? Hey, go listen to this frequency at this time of day. Do they just listen and record what they hear, and then that generates an advisory notice? Or
Well, it's a little bit of both. We opened applications in 2019 for volunteer monitors. It was published in the league, and we got 250 applications, and we set up 225 volunteer monitors, and the rest were in a reserve pool. Now we've lost some over the years due to COVID and aging out, moving into restricted housing and so forth. But the pool has been very stable. We lost just a few volunteer monitors last year, usually due to health or moving, as I said. And we pull from the reserve pool. We get about 6 active applications a month, which we usually keep in the reserve pool. We haven't opened up the application process again because the FCC thought that about 150 to 175 would be the biggest manageable number of volunteer monitors, and that's about what we have now, right about 140, and it'll vary a little bit. Basically, they just do their own monitoring as part of their operation, and it's up to them what they listen to. Some of them are like to specialize in FT8 and watch for FT8 operation out of band. We will occasionally, and by occasionally I mean every couple of months, put out a little bulletin that says look for a single sideband operation that's out of band. For example, generals in extra class portions or technicians operating single sideband in a general portion. But generally, we leave it up to them to file an incident report if they think something needs our attention, and we'll look at that. And we don't worry about the petty stuff. If somebody doesn't identify for 20 minutes, we can't worry about that. Like I said, our job's not to aggravate the hell out of everybody. Our job is to have effective a buy-in to this thing. And I think it is effective because, as I said, the recidivism rate is less than 0.5%. But it's mainly up to them what they want to listen to, what frequencies and so forth. And across the board, with that many volunteers across the country, it covers about everything. We get good coverage on all our bands, and we have a couple of states. I think maybe Montana or Utah, one of the states out there, doesn't have volunteer monitors, but with HF that doesn't matter too much. We have some that like to listen to repeaters. Some focus on 40 meters or 75 meters. So their job is to audit and report items of concern. And just because they file an incident report doesn't mean that we take any action. Sometimes it's just not actionable. Sometimes it'll warrant a phone call to the operator and say, hey, we got this report. Let's talk about this or see if you can clean this up a little bit. So it's kind of a freewheeling thing. And And so far it's working, and the FCC needs it because they have lost so many people. But I don't think the FCC has to worry about Doge and that stuff, because over the last 5 or 6 years, they've lost a huge number of people, and their staffing is down to what it was in the 1940s. So there may be a small wave of voluntary retirements as they offer early outs, but otherwise, I think the FCC is pretty stable. They just don't have a lot of resources to put in any given service except public safety. And they can't send an agent out in a town and listen for 3 days for somebody that's interfering with a repeater, for example, or somebody that's interfering on HF. They just can't spend that much time anymore, and that's where we come in. We kind of focus on the time of day and the frequency and the operating pattern, and we get a lot of referrals from the FCC to pattern the operation and then get the information back to them. So far it seems to be working fine. We just need a little more courtesy and a little more common sense in the bands, like we do in just about every other segment of society these days.
All right, thank you. Daryl, you had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to tie in what you just said about the FCC, and I think it's a great partnership that you have formed between the league and FCC. Now, when it comes to actual enforcement, I think you guys, of course, do a lot of the filtering out. But when it actually does come to true enforcement, how does all that work? And I haven't seen very much enforcement lately, but how does all that kind of work? You guys report back to them and say, hey, we think this needs attention?
Yes, when we send an advisory notice, sometimes, like I said, in rare cases, we have to send a second advisory notice. But if it gets to the situation where that doesn't do it, we refer it to the FCC and ask them to issue a warning letter or do some monitoring to verify it and so forth. But that rarely happens except on the group that I mentioned, the group of people around 7,200. The system, the compliance is amazing overall in the amateur service, given the number of operators that we have. It's absolutely amazing. And a lot of times, a phone call, a one-on-one discussion with some of these characters will get it straightened out.
Okay, thank you so
Now,
much,
let me
Ben.
say this
Oh,
too. The FCC does a lot that you don't see, because with changes in the Privacy Act, the FCC can only publish final actions. So they do a lot of warning letters and things like that that you won't see. When the FCC issues a warning letter, you won't see those. We usually know about them, but they're not public. And so, they could be issuing warning letters in your area and you wouldn't even know it, because they don't reveal that due to the Privacy Act and due to its not being a final action. But there's a lot more going on than you think. Just because you don't see it, don't assume that they're not out there.
And any questions on Zoom? No? Okay, any other questions here in the room? Oh, is that a hand over there? You had a question? Oh, we got a question over here. One moment.
You mentioned solar as a big problem area, but what about, is there any other large scale thing out there, like giant server farms, or are the EV charging centers? They have a dozen charging stations, but there's a huge power battery backup thing nearby to that thing. And also, is the G5, is that tightened down so it won't go into a handheld?
I don't know about G5 and the solar fields that you see that are hundreds of acres, that, believe it or not, they cause hardly any interference. Most of the interference from solar comes from individual installations. And some of the solar companies out in your area, in California, work very closely with the league. In fact, I think it's Solar Edge that will if they get a complaint, they'll send out a tech or solve it on the phone. It's usually a very simple fix. The installer doesn't know anything about it. They just put the things in and leave. But Solar Edge, from what I hear from the league, has been wonderfully cooperative about getting the interference, changing the device and the solar thing. So we have a good reputation with them so far, thanks to the league and working with them and trying to be diplomatic. But it's usually the individual installations and not the big solar fields, the solar panels that you see. But the point is, solar is the wave of the future, of course. Now, these charging stations, I don't know about. I don't have any cases of interference from those. I know that in Europe, they're working on some interference cases for these systems that theoretically would charge the vehicle as you drive down the road. Apparently, they're terrible. And that's why we need the league to keep their finger on all these things and work with all the corporations that are doing this and all the companies, because the FCC just doesn't have the staff and they're not forward thinking enough to do that.
I have a quick follow-up on that. Is it the solar panels or is it the inverters? I would guess it's the inverters that are causing the problem.
As far as I know, it's the inverters.
I got it.
Yeah, Andy K, 6080. Riley, does ARRL provide a list of recommended solar systems that have less interference?
I don't know, it wouldn't be a recommendation, but they could certainly tell you which systems don't cause interference and which companies are the most cooperative. I think they would do that, and that's the FCC lab, which I don't know what we would do without. If we didn't have the FCC lab, it was the FCC lab that broke the BPL bandwagon because the FCC had misrepresented BPL from day one, and the ARRL, their scientific research was used in the court proceedings. But I don't know that they'd have recommendations, but they could certainly tell you which systems were good and which weren't so good. Remember when these circuit breakers came out, the fast acting breakers that were really set up for a bedroom circuit. I can't think of what they were called. And they generated horrible amateur radio interference. But one of the big companies making those things was Eaton, and the league worked very closely with the Eaton company, and they changed the design on those. And you just don't hear about that type of interference anymore. So you need somebody like the league and the league lab to work with these companies. And I might also say that in all the years at the FCC and all the years since, I have never seen anybody represent amateur radio, anybody other than the league. So if you're not members, I'd strongly encourage you to become a member, because we have to have strength in numbers. And I think the only thing standing between us and oblivion on our frequencies is the league, because they're the only entity in the world that represents amateur radio. And if we don't have them, we're on our own, and that's not good to be on your own in today's technology. So we really need the league and the lab and the research they do and the close work that they do with the FCC and so forth. So if you're not a member, think about it, because we've got to have strength. There's strength in numbers, as you all know.
Raleigh, it's Daryl again. I just had last March I had REC solar panels. They're DC. They're not the ones with the microinverters, but I also had a Tesla battery put in. And I actually told them that I actually am an amateur radio operator, that I was concerned about noise. The Tesla inverters are quiet. I'm not finding noise from that. It runs the house. But I will tell you, I was watching them install it, and there's several toroids they put in there across the cables that go across. So they clearly know something about noise reduction.
Good.
So I just thought I'd share that. But anyway, my second point is, if you are anybody who's going to have solar installed, and and you're a ham, tell them you're a ham. That's another way to get the word out that we need to have less noise and being able to do communication
Yeah.
effectively. So I thought I'd throw that in there. Thank you again.
Yeah,
and I
yes, and
appreciate-
if your neighbor or somebody's putting one in or thinking about it, talk to them about it and encourage them to talk to the league about which systems draw complaints and which systems don't. Try to get to it in the beginning, because all too often when you get an interference case, when the league gets it or when we get it, the neighbor and the amateur operator are already at odds and usually not speaking. And then it's a little late to work on a problem. All right, I'm going to sign here. As I said, K4ZDH@ARRL.net, not org, but .net. Send me any of your questions and I'll get back with you. I'll get an answer to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Riley. Very educational. Appreciate the time. Back
Thank
to
you.
you, Bob.
Okay, yes, thank you, Riley. That was very, very informational. I learned a lot.